Well, how are you, listeners and viewers? Welcome to the second show of Reid Lance Rosenthal, The Cowboys Take. And thanks for tuning in. I appreciate it a bunch. We have a radio show on the Right Side Radio. You can learn all about it on therightsideradio.com for those of you who are not the radio listeners. And we're going to be mixing and matching between these various shows going into the future. We're going to have interviews on the video show here. Some great guests. We have a terrific lineup. Today we have Phil Streible, and Phil is a 20-year veteran of the futures markets. And the futures markets, they are the foundation. They are the cornerstone of the foundation of capitalism. And they tell a story. They tell a story into the future, the futures markets. And the story they're telling right now, the story they're warning of right now, is, shall we say, not a happy one. We're going to be talking about that today, and we're going to be talking about what the futures market is. Additionally, we're going to be talking about, how to get involved in the futures market if you want to. Very risky, can also be very lucrative. It's also a business tool for hedging for certain types of industries, which Phil is going to describe to you. But I think you will know a lot more about this mysterious part of the economy that people have heard of, but most people are not aware of. And the first future markets, by the way, go back many hundreds, in fact, thousands of years. Literally, countries or governments or cities, when you had city-states way back when, remember Troy and all those types of things back during the Grecian days. They had a type of hedge too. Sometimes it was with money, and sometimes it was with barter. I will guarantee you X amount of tons, or whatever their measurement was at that time, of grain, and you will guarantee me X amount of tons of corn, which in a way fixed the price of both the grain and the corn in the future between the two people or the two city states or the two countries that were engaged in the pursuit. But they've become very sophisticated now. There's exchanges all over the world that deal in virtually everything you can imagine and then some, as Phil will be telling you. Last week we had John Rubino on, quite the meister of, should we say, financial preparedness, metals, investments, geopolitics, trends within the economy and within the country. And he was terrific. I've followed him for years, and I have followed Phil for a long time also. We'll have contact information for you on Phil during the show and posted below. Please leave your comments. We're kind of feeling our way out a little bit here. This is this is only the second show, and on the video, that is. And we're going to be mixing and matching, like I said, between the radio and the video. So folks who are listening to the radio show are going to be hearing parts of the interviews over a number of weeks, kind of the punchline part of the video coming the second week on its airing on the radio show. And the folks that are here listening and watching will be able to see the full bore interviews. So it all depends what your taste is, or maybe you want to hear it twice. And on the radio show, and we've become known for this, we have literally millions of listeners. And by the way, I want to thank you, just as an aside, for all those people who watched the inaugural show with John last week, and all his contact information is under that show also. There were thousands of you that tuned in from the time we posted it on Friday to the time I'm speaking to you now. And I really appreciate that for the very first show. On the radio show, we generally have a historical story. And we're probably going to be doing that on these videos also. I just gave you a really brief one on the long history, thousands of years of futures trading, although not like it's done today. Not like it's done today. Not with the click of a mouse and worldwide as it is today. And I'm going to be bringing a historical story, tying it into the events and the interview of this particular video, whichever one you happen to be watching on into the future. And like we do on the radio show, I'm going to bring you a founder's quote every show, because the founders were wise way beyond their time. I mean, they kind of knew what was going on, and they kind of had an innate sense for human beings. And they certainly had a sense for freedom. And I'm going to be bringing you a ranch story because, at heart, I'm a rancher. Yes, I'm also an author, and they're #1 national bestsellers and all that stuff. And I'm also a real estate guy and all that stuff. And we're going to have some shows on real estate, by the way, both housing and land and how to buy it and where to look for it and all sorts of things that go with it, including my book, Land for Love and Money. We're going to try and stay away from commercials on these videos. There's commercials on the radio shows, obviously, because the AM stations, they have to feed their kids. We understand. It's great. Everybody gets to make a profit. This is the United States still, even though folks are trying to change it. And at the end of these shows on the videos, I'm going to bring you rat-a-tat-tat. Now, you radio listeners who are tuning in, you know what rat-a-tat-tat is. It is a drumbeat cadence of current events. Most of them will curl your hair, pop your eyes, and your jaw will hit the table. Make sure you have a pillow on the table when you listen to these little tidbits that we bring. And on the rightsideradio.com has all the stories under various categories. You can click on them. When I bring you a tidbit of news, you can go read the entire story, see all the source materials, the whole 9 yards. I was trained in journalism. I mean, I'm 4th generation land and cattle, but I was trained in journalism at Colorado State University. And I believe in bringing you information which is true and correct, at least to the best of my ability, telling you when I'm giving you an opinion rather than a fact, and backing up those facts with substance and with research and with articles, and hopefully more than one source wherever I can muster it. So anyway, welcome to the second show of Reid Lance Rosenthal on the Cowboys Take. And let's do our founder's quote, shall we? We're going to go to Thomas Jefferson because Thomas Jefferson is really one of my favorites. And this is really, really, really apropos. Quote, "To preserve our independence, we must not let our rulers load us with perpetual debt. We must make our election between economy and liberty, or profusion and servitude." How true that is, right? How true that is. And by the way, I'm kind of a dinosaur. You're visiting Jurassic Park right now. My technical abilities amount to less than that much. So thank God for my producers. Thanks to all of them. And if we have technical difficulties from time to time, it's not really technical difficulties, it's really cowboy difficulties. What can I tell you? Anyway, you got the founder's quote now. Let me give you the ranch story. And it's the same one I had on the radio show, which, by the way, airs at the same time or begins to air at the same time as these shows come out every Friday. First, let me tell you that some people have had trouble finding the Cowboys Take. We're on Rumble, we're on BitChute, we're on Pradion, we're on YouTube, we're on all sorts of platforms. And what we have found is if you type in Reid Lance Rosenthal, the Cowboys Take, you can find it. Better yet, we have the links on therightsideradio.com. You can pass them out to your friends or whatever. They're in the upper left-hand corner of the home page. If you're looking at it on your phone, click on what's called desktop view, and they will be in the upper left-hand corner on your phone screen too. Otherwise, they're at the lower left-hand corner of your phone screen. But those links will bring you right here, and you can listen at your leisure and at your pleasure. So, the ranch story. There's always a moral to these ranch stories. That's one of the reasons I bring them to you, also to kind of entertain you and entertain myself, to be honest with you. Today's story, though, is about a woman who is really remarkable. She put herself through school trapping, literally, and guiding. And she then went to Catherine Gibbs. This is back in the 1930s and 40s. She then went to Catherine Gibbs, which was a hoity-toity business school. And then she was involved in the editorship. She was like assistant fashion editor and assistant to the fashion editor of Vogue magazine. So how's that for a dichotomy? And she went on to have two kids and a very successful life and a great marriage. And she became a realtor. She started her own business. She worked for other realtors to begin with. And then she started her own business, which was wildly successful. One of the top brokers in the United States in residential for decades. And she is, as of this about a week ago, 100 years old. That's right, 100 years old, a centurion, about 3/1000% of the population. And she's sharper than a tack. She's kind of writing her third book right now, believe it or not. She actually closed two real estate deals, or was involved in the closing of two real estate deals over the last 3 or 4 months. And she happens to be my mom. I'm one of the two kids she had. And this last weekend, I went down to see her and the clan. About 80 people showed up for her birthday celebration. I saw cousins literally I haven't seen for 2, 3, maybe 4 decades in a few cases. And there was a boatload of good people there. We had a blast. It was absolutely terrific. She was delighted, and it was all good. And reminded me, despite these shows I bring you, whether it's radio or whether it's video, and despite the unfortunate gloom and doom, despite the fragility and the reality of our situation here personally and in the United States, I mean, we're all in this together, folks. We are all Americans. What's really important are those close to you. What's really important is your family, particularly your kids and your mother and your father. And time is short and time is precious. And whatever time you can spend with them and whatever time you can devote to those relationships is time well spent. Everything else is, as I said on the radio show, rah rah. It is rah rah. In other words, it is secondary nonsense. So enjoy life and enjoy those close to you. That's the, shall we say, moral of this particular week's rant story. Next week, we'll be back to the home on the range story, whatever exciting adventures are happening on the ranch here. And now I want to introduce Philip Streible, who is terrific. I think you're going to enjoy this a bunch, and you will absolutely learn a pile about the futures market, which I think many of us have wondered about for years and years and years. It'll put things in perspective, the whole economic situation, and shall we say how things work, how prices bubble up from a floor to a top, and what people do along the way to safeguard their positions and make money. You know, capitalism is capitalism, profit is profit. So here we go with Philip Streible. How you doing, folks? So we have our second video edition here of, and the radio show, of course, of the Cowboys Take on the Right Side Radio.com and on the Right Side Radio News Information Services. And today we have Phil Streible, who's a hotshot mucky muck in the futures business. And he kind of guides and helps to guide Blue Line Futures, which, by the way, is a terrific outfit. He's going to tell you about himself and a little bit about Blue Line. And then at the end, we're going to put up the links and all that kind of good stuff, both on the video sites and on the radio website on the rightsideradio.com. But the purpose of this is that you've all heard of futures. But, like, what are futures? And what is extremely critical role do they play in the global economy? and in the pricing of raw materials, commodities, food, you name it, which affects your day-to-day life. Oil, grain, corn, copper, silver, gold, you name it. The futures market is where it all starts. And there's a lot of shenanigans that go on in the futures market too. Phil's going to share that with you a little bit too, because everybody kind of, shall we say, is out for money in the futures market. So, Phil, tell us about yourself.
Well, I've worked in the futures and commodities industry for over 20 years, kind of specializing in all areas of the futures, whether it's active hedging in the agricultural commodities or speculating in the direction of energies due to rising geopolitical tensions or positioning for just rising inflation altogether, given all the government spending. What we do is we work with you to help and design a futures trading strategy that's right for you. So Blue Line Futures is a futures commodities trading firm. We specialize in providing personalized, custom tailored trading strategies and experiences for different people. Whether you're looking for like a low cost online trading platform for a sophisticated self-directed trader or more of a hands-off approach through one of our award-winning CTA programs, we really got you covered here. So we at Blue Line Futures, and what our clients love most is kind of the interaction we have with our clients, as well as the research and the content that we put out. We put out daily videos and different actionable ideas, and we email those out to our clients every day. So really the nuts and bolts of it is you hear about inflation, you hear about rising input costs. What we do is we help you speculate and try and profit from those type of directional moves.
All right, terrific. Explain what the futures market is. What is the futures market?
So originally what the futures markets were was a standardized way of somebody coming in and hedging forward pricing. So for instance, you have a farmer that's going to go out and he's going to plant soybeans and corn in the field, and that's basically what they're doing right now, and that they know in 6 to 9 months that crop will come to fruition and it'll be ready to be sold off to the end user. What the futures market does is allows people to put hedges in place or speculations in place going farther out to try and lock in either a particular hedge, like a cattle rancher selling a forward contract of August or December live cattle against some of those smaller cattle that are just being, brought to market and everything else. The same thing with the grain markets. You plant it in the ground, you're waiting 6 to 9 months. You've already locked in that end price by selling forward a futures contract. What makes things interesting is that what it was originally designed for was the hedging aspect of it, but we noticed that people want to get out of those contracts prematurely, or they just want to play some small event that occurs, whether it's an election, a storm, rising geopolitical tensions. They come in and they will purchase different contracts or short contracts and try and play those different little price swings and profit from it.
So, let's take the example of the cattle rancher. That kind of hits home here. So, let's say you got 1,000 head and you plan to bring them to market November, December-ish, and you're worried that prices may fall, right? So you're trying to hedge against a falling price. You may not make as much in the end, but you are guarding against losing your butt.
It's the peace of mind that people that the hedgers use that for. And I've got just so many cattle ranchers and agricultural professionals, farmers. About half of our business here at Blue Line Futures is working with those ranchers and also on the agricultural side. We put out a great report every day called the Livestock Roundup, and then also the Grain Express. It's helped written by my partner here, Oliver Slope. He's another veteran that's been in the field here, and maybe one day he'll come on your program. I think you really enjoy him.
Yeah, and the same is true with other industries. I mean, miners, gold miners or silver miners, they're taking the ore out of the ground. They got fixed costs, obviously greatly inflated over the last few years. And they want to make sure that if they're expending those costs, getting that mineral out of the ground, whatever the mineral happens to be, it could be anything. They want to make sure that they at least have some kind of profit built into it so that at the end of the day, they don't spend $100 million taking out 1,000 ounces of gold, and gold goes down to $10, right?
Yeah, 110%. So their biggest costs are going to be energy costs, and it'll also be insurance, and then it's also going to be the cost just for people to work. So your employment costs, your wages, and things like that, and then also your equipment. So in an event like if you were running a large scale mining operation, you'd be concerned about if we're heading into some geopolitical tensions or there's some uncertainty in the Middle East and there's rising energy prices. They might take a position where they buy 42,000 gallons of gasoline or buy 100 or 1,000 barrels of crude oil to lock in those energy costs and protect against rising costs. At the same time, they might also look at the price of something like silver or gold, which are near record highs on gold, for instance. They might say, hey, we're going to produce 1,000 ounces of gold over the next 3 months. Why don't we go 3 months out on the futures market and sell 10 contracts of gold out there? Now we've locked in all-time high prices on gold, and then we know what our fixed costs are because we've already purchased and paid off, that property, plant, equipment, and employment expenditures.
Okay, cool. Cool. I mean, even oil companies hedge oil, right?
Oh, absolutely. You've got companies like BP, Amoco, ExxonMobil, they're all big players in the markets here. Even countries like when you go to like something like Mexico, where they'll have to, either input oil or they've got their own production issues, they'll say that, hey, we want to sell off quite a bit of oil, but we also want to protect our downside. So they'll buy put options in the futures markets, or a situation like a country over in the Middle East like Pakistan it's a mountainous region. They can't produce any oil. They're concerned about prices going up. So they'll go to the $100 strike price and buy call options all the way out, capping what their maximum cost is.
Okay. Explain for the folks what a call option is and what a put is.
Yeah, a call option is the right but not the obligation to own something at a specific price. It's kind of like it's kind of like health insurance, to put it easy. Every month I've got to go out and pay, a few $100s in health insurance or car insurance. Quite simply, that might even be an easier way to put. Everyone pays car insurance, and say it's $100 a month. That protects your car and the underlying value of it. If you get into a car accident, and you total your car, well, you're lucky you paid that premium, that $100 premium, because they're going to replace your $20,000, $30,000 car, whatever it is, because of that insurance cost. That was the premium you paid. Same thing with health insurance. If you break a leg or something, you pay that small premium. It's going to protect against that. That's kind of what a call option is there. Now, a put option, I would say, is more like homeowners insurance. You pay every month and you hope that your home doesn't crumble up in flames or burn down or something, and where it's not worth it or worth any money at all. You pay that homeowner's insurance. That's like buying a put. It's the right but not the obligation to put something at a specific price to somebody else over a specific period of time. So I pay for that homeowner's insurance, and I live on the Gulf of Mexico. It's quite expensive. It might be $1,000 a month. If a hurricane wipes us out, I'm glad I got that $1,000 deductible, because they'll replace, a multi-million-dollar home.
Basically, you can put the house to the insurance company.
Exactly. The great
Yeah,
way to put it.
right. Okay, cool. Cool. Now, these markets are global, okay? Let the folks know kind of what happens in the major commodities futures markets around the globe. In the United States, we have the COMEX, right? That's most people have heard of it in Chicago. But what about the rest of the planet too?
So you've got different commodities trading on different exchanges, and a lot of them are interconnected. Like if you look at crude oil, for instance, we trade the West Texas Intermediate crude oil. Over in the Middle East, it's a slightly different blend. So that's going to be your Brent crude oil contract. If you go to like gold or something else like silver, it's standardized contracts on the COMEX. Well, if you go to the LME, it's going to be in a different weighting, so it'll be on metric tons and things like that. So
And
it's
the
just the
and the
these
LME is a London exchange.
Yeah, that's the
Right,
London Metals Exchange.
right.
So all these different commodity exchanges, really what they're created for is to act as hubs for delivery of different commodities and also taking in different commodities. So you'll notice that like some of the commodity exchanges like in the Midwest is the Chicago Mercantile Exchange. It's centrally located there to operate around different farmers that are close by, where you're going to see when they bring that crop all the way to the end user, they'll oftentimes load it up on a barge, ship it down the Mississippi River, and it gets distributed that way. You go over to London, they don't have a grain exchange because they're not big producers of things like corn and soybeans and wheat, where they're big producers of, metals and different financial institutions. They might trade treasuries and different currencies there. And then you go to South America, those exchanges will have different products on them as well, where it'll be like peanuts and sugar and cocoa and coffee, where it's just where things are grown differently is how the exchanges are set up.
And do all these commodities and all these various exchanges around the planet, in one way, shape, or form, they're all interconnected, right? I mean, if you're not going to see gold, let's say, go down in Shanghai and rise dramatically in New York. I mean, give or take, they're going to kind of move in concert.
Yeah, there'll be different arbitrage areas to exploit. So if there is a differential, and my father-in-law traded the first silver contract on the Chicago Exchange back in the early 70s. And
Really?
what he would do is he would work with the brokers in New York, and as prices would show some kind of discrepancy, it could just be down to just a few cents on the contract, but the magnitude of the size of the contracts, they would buy one and sell the other, and it would bring prices together, and that creates the arbitrage. Now, most of the arbitrage now, all those gaps are basically closed because of the fact you've got computers, algorithms, places like Sentinel that they're going to bring these things together because their computer programs will detect these different things. So the arbitrage opportunities aren't necessarily there anymore.
Basically, there's literally nothing that can't be in one way, shape, or form traded if you look at all these exchanges around the world. I mean, maybe other than oxygen, air, you know.
I think they even were proposing water for a while. They've done
Yeah.
they've done real estate, things like that. The Chicago and the New York exchanges, they really comprise of about 27 different commodities, all your agricultural products, your livestock products, your metals, your stock indices, your debt instruments, your energies, and then some of the soft commodities. So basically, you don't really have to leave the continental US and you should be able to hedge any of these products.
And there's a whole nother cast of characters in the futures market all around the globe. And those are what I would call the speculators, right? I mean, you have the basic industries who are doing it as part of their industry shtick, part of their business operation, buying their insurance, doing their puts, doing their calls, making sure, well, I may make a little less, but I'm not going to lose my butt here. But then you have the hangers-ons, right? The peripheries, the people who are jumping in and out of the market going, oh, I think I can make quick buck here because silver's going to go up or wheat's going to go down or oil's going to go sideways or whatever.
Yeah, 100%. So the speculators make up about 95% of the liquidity in the market. And I mean, some
Really?
of these
Wow.
markets have billions and if not trillions of dollars of notional value of these products are being traded almost every second, about 23 hours a day, from Sunday night at 5 p.m. until about 4 p.m. on Central Time on Friday. So people are really active in it. And for myself, working as a broker and working with, hundreds and even thousands of individuals, I see kind of what they're doing over here, and I could see the tides are turning. So when you start to get prices like something like silver that had a dramatic move today, was up over 4%. When you get later in the session, I'll see people that buy silver low, it goes up all day long, they sell it out, and then they go, hey, Phil, you know what? I think prices might be a little bit too high. We might pull back. And then they come in and they short the market for a few minutes and then they close it out and they made it on both then. They got their cake and they, and the icing and they ate both sides of it.
Right. So, and I mean, bottom line is if you're an adept trader, you have good advice, such as you, or you can watch the thing like every minute of every second, which very few people can do, and you know what you're doing. You have experience. You might, underline might, do very well. On the other hand, there's a hell of a lot of risk with this stuff for a speculator, isn't there?
Yeah, of course. I mean, that's where contract sizing, position sizing, and then keeping an eye on your margins and things like that, because all these products are, leveraged products. So you take something like crude oil, for instance. Everyone's familiar with crude oil. They put it in their car, things like that. They recognize that prices go up when we have geopolitical tensions and things like that. So I had a lot of people when the Middle East conflict was breaking out, they were calling in and saying, hey, I think crude oil prices are going to go higher. So what they'll do is they'll look at different contract sizes, and those range from 100 barrels on up to 1,000 barrels. If you take the price of crude oil, which is right around, let's call it $80, it's a little shy of
Yeah.
that right now. If you got 1,000 barrel contract you're controlling, that's $80,000 worth of crude. That's a lot of crude oil. So from like a risk management standpoint, I don't think I want $80,000 worth of crude oil, but I could say, hey, something like on a 100 barrel contract, I could speculate on $8,000 worth of crude oil. And if it goes up to $100 a barrel, since you control 100 barrels of crude oil, now that $8,000 is worth $10,000. If the crude oil goes from $80 a barrel down to $60 a barrel, your contract's worth $6,000. So you, in theory, lost $2,000.
Right. And the way the outfits like yours and the big exchanges take care of that is the difference between what you paid for the contract, whether it was a put or a call, it doesn't matter. What the difference between what you paid and what the value of the contract is really that's a totality of your risk. If oil in your example went to zero, your butt's on the line for $8,000 and they're going to come get it.
Yeah, and actually in 2020, when there was no demand for crude oil prices went negative. That was the first
Yeah, right.
commodity I'd ever seen
Right.
do that. And because of the fact that you bought this contract, where are you going to store the oil at some point? So you got to pay someone to store it from you. And that's where things went negative because there was no demand for crude oil, as crazy as that sounds. But a lot of people are comfortable with something like silver, something that they're like a hard asset that many of the people they've bought silver coins and bars over the time. They realize that 1,000 ounces of silver, we don't anticipate that silver prices go back down to $5 or $10 or maybe not even $15 anymore. So you kind of mentally build this inherent floor in the market, call it like a line in the sand. So you
Right.
know that kind of that $15,000. I don't want to, downplay the risk, but we just don't anticipate prices getting that lower. So everything above that from 15 to where we're at right now really is where your risk, the bulk of your risk lies, and your account's going to fluctuate based upon that.
And in the end, people can always take delivery. I mean, this is really kind of cool. So, yeah, you're playing the money, you're playing the insurance, you're playing the hedge, depending upon who you are and what your motive is. But in the end, on that silver contract that we were just talking about, you can go, the hell with it. I don't care what the price is. Give me my 1,000 ounces of silver.
Yeah, that's what I did when it was about $15 an ounce. I bought a 5,000 ounce contract, so it's about $75,000 worth of crude or worth of silver. It went up into the 20s, and I was like, well, I'm like, I might as well take delivery of this just so I can understand the process of it. And I jumped in my car, drove to New York. They threw it in the back of my trunk. I don't recommend that because it's like 360 pounds of silver, and my car was bottoming out. My dad said I did more damage to the suspension than in the steering than I did, made value of the silver. But it is something that you could do. People do find some peace of mind storing those. We do have people that make delivery of the agricultural products, or they
Right.
take delivery of different things, so, but most end users are going to offset at some point. I mean, personally, when it comes to silver, if I was to buy it and it went up to $50 an ounce, I'd rather just own the futures contract and sell the futures contract and reap the rewards
Right.
of the dollars that I'd made on it than go take delivery of it, have to lug it to a pawn shop or something and have to deal with those guys. So it's just more of a convenience factor for a lot of people, is the ability to offset it as easy as you can buy it.
And what we're seeing now, with as screwed up as the planet is, and the United States economy is, we're seeing a lot of big players, right? Even countries like China. They're going into the markets, the futures markets. They're tying up contracts, but their intent is to take delivery.
That's the that I would say that's been the biggest argument for gold recently and gold futures, because central banks in different countries, they can hold gold in their vaults and it's considered a currency for them. Now, China is a big buyer of agricultural products and things like that. But I think that really gold's the one that hits home. Like I said, up 13% year to date. And it's the uncontrollable government spending that's not only in the US, but abroad in many other countries, which has caused this rising inflation, which has caused cracks in the economy to occur. And that never before have I experienced a time where it seems like more countries seem to be at odds of one another. And as a result, those countries want to reduce their foreign currency stockpiles because they just frankly don't trust other countries. So because of the irresponsible fiscal spending. So what they
Right.
do is they substitute that currency with hard assets such as gold. And that was what really drove prices up to all-time highs.
That's a perfect lead in to where I want to go next. And that is, in your opinion, having played in this a long time, I mean, basically your family's been in a long time, what the futures kind of forecast things in a lot of ways. And in your mind, what are they forecasting? We'll go over three things: economics, inflation, and shall we say, the basic prices of everyday goods, services, and supplies going into the future. So, first of all, what are they telling you gut level about what's going on with the economy?
Well, the problem with the economy right now is that, really, if you want to get into it, like the current administration, the spending has just gotten out of control. I mean, I can't even keep up with the numbers. It spent $5.5 trillion in government spending. The national debt is $34 trillion. And, where does all the money go? So it's these kind of cracks that start to form in the economy. And if you look at the inflation data that's coming out, it seemed like since the COVID pandemic, it seems like everyone got a little bit greedy as far as, wanting to hold higher prices, and also labor costs are higher. All those things trickle effect into some of these reports that come out, these economic reports like CPI and PPI, which is producer price index and consumer price index. They measure the inflation that's out there, and we're seeing these prices hold at elevated levels, and it handcuffs the government. And that's why commodities across the board, they start to predict that, hey, we're going to see higher inflation costs going forward. So the price of something like crude oil starts to rally on that. Some of these things, like you guys all heard about cocoa recently going to all-time highs in the market. These are things that are greatly impacted because of the economy, the inflation, and then the trickle down effect of, the current administrations.
So basically, in your opinion, it's what the futures markets around the globe are saying is get ready for higher prices in most areas.
100%. I mean, there's no question about it. There's no, even if you go to the grocery store, even if you're a bargain hunter, you're going to see that the prices are up. I mean, everyone was talking about eggs at one point, but I mean, it's just everywhere. It's in the grains. It's in the price of, even bottled water. It's just we're never going to get back to those lower levels. And it's like gasoline, for instance. I fill up and it's $4. $3 feels like a gift. $2 seems like it's unheard of anymore. So it's just going to be natural that the more spending that the government does, the more dollars that are out there, the more it dilutes your dollar, and the higher the bottom line costs are for anything.
Right. What that pretty much summed up all three questions. That's great. What, in your opinion, are the, and we're not talking about, the big agribusinesses or the big oil companies. Tell me the five commodities which you think are kind of most exciting for, the Joe Blow. How's that?
Well, I still think ones that there's newer ones that are really come to, and it seems like in the last couple years have really shined. One of the best performing commodities this year is the copper market. And everybody knows about copper. Everyone's heard about, there was a vacant home and somebody stole all the copper wiring out of there and
Right,
pawned it out.
right,
Why
right.
did they do that? Because they were anticipating that copper prices were going to go higher. Now there's a real run on copper at the moment. And the reason is because there's a push for increased electric power because of the green energy revolution. We've got rising EV vehicle demand. I mean, I could just think back 5, 10 years ago. I see a Tesla and I'd be like, wow, I'd be calling all my friends. I saw my first Tesla. I actually just saw my first Cybertruck, just recently. So rising electric vehicle demand and advancements in now AI this year has been a big push. And all that's done, all these different electrical things, because you got to plug in that EV car because it takes more processors to process this artificial intelligence. It's strained the outdated electrical grid. So that combination pushes up demand for copper, silver, and other metallic metals higher. And that's why year to date, we're looking at copper prices are up 25% and silver prices are up 21%. So I'd say that those are kind of the most exciting. I think that gold is the one that many people can understand because they were around and they saw the Bretton Woods Act. They saw gold
Right.
prices went from $35 to one. They broke it from the dollar index, and now the dollar's heading higher. And I still think crude oil is probably one of the better commodities out there. And it's kind of a call option on some uncertainty as far as geopolitics.
Yeah. And I mean, in the end, nothing runs. You can't mine gold, you can't mine silver, you can't mine copper, you can't produce the wires for the New Green Deal. You can't do any of that crap without petrol. You got to have the
100%.
fossil fuels.
The crazy thing is despite the global hatred for oil, it plays an essential role in everyone's lives. I read somewhere once that 6,000 everyday use products are made from petroleum. So you cannot deny its importance. So part of the recent surge in prices is the way that the administration affects stockpiles and has different hoops that people need to run through in order to produce oil. So our stockpiles in the US continue to trend below, say, the 5 year average. 5 years of where have our stockpiles been? We're currently right now at 459 million barrels in inventories, where the 5 year average was 474 million. So we're running a much tighter oil picture. And then in the Midwest, the oil inventories are 35 million barrels. The 5 year average has been 44 million barrels. In going back from a global standpoint, when you talk about oil, you got to look at OPEC in the Middle East. Those guys are the largest producers of oil. And when you get rising tensions and you get these countries lobbing missiles at each other or whatever, it's difficult for them to keep production levels high. And at the same time, a country like Saudi Arabia, you think about what do they actually produce? They really don't produce anything but oil. They need to balance their budget on higher oil prices. So they cut production, they manipulate prices higher, and they need $85 in crude oil to average that in order to balance their budget. That's why I believe that when you look at where oil prices are at, given a recent sell off we have, and how a major player or the largest player in oil needs to get prices up there, I think that with some will, they'll find a way to get prices up there.
Yeah, I mean, and you also have impetus from Russia. They want higher prices. They have their war effort to fund. And the only country in the world who really would like to see the prices kept down would be China, because that's fueling their entire manufacturing boom over there, despite any of the problems they're having right now. It's really interesting, despite all this Green New Deal nonsense. It is what it is, but it's nonsense. We're not going to incinerate tomorrow, folks. And if you think all these billionaire greenies, and I could run down the list from Obama to Gates to John Kerry himself, the energy czar. If you think they believe that, then you have to explain to me why they're spending $30 million on a beachfront, 4 feet in elevation above sea level house. You'll just have to explain that to me, because somehow that just doesn't equate.
You got to think about the celebrities that really push the green energy and the green energy deal, and then you see their jet that flies 20
Exactly.
minutes to get to a I mean, it's so unbelievably hypocritical on there. I think this goes a little bit definitely beyond me, but I think if you look at how the US produces energy, how we utilize energy, I think we probably do a great job for the environment. And I think that maybe perhaps trying to produce some of these green energy new deals that probably disrupts the environment more. We've already,
Absolutely.
established that we need this petroleum and things, and that's why we do such a great job keeping it safe and producing. I think really we need to take that technology to a lot of countries that will probably never shift to green energy because of the fact that they just don't have the infrastructure to do it, and that we
And they
should
have brain
help
and they
them.
and they and they have brains.
Yeah, and help them. Well, yeah, but help them, make their current use of petroleum products, natural gas, and things like that, to filter it so it's better for the environment. I think it would just get much more done.
I had this on the radio show a couple of weeks ago. Uh, so over the last 20 years, 5 to 7 trillion, which is part of the whole inflation mess right now, has been spent on this green new energy boondoggle. And after all of that money and all of this hoopla and all of this dancing around and all of this wringing our hands, we're going to incinerate 9 years. At the end of the day, the fossil fuel generation of energy on the planet has moved from 82% to 81. That kind of says it all, right? That kind of says it.
Yeah, yeah. I
All
mean,
right.
yeah,
Um,
I was gonna say we just saw there was an interview on BBC with a president of a country that was extracting oil, and he was being attacked because of the amount of carbon emissions that they were releasing. And the
right.
reality is that the president retaliated against the reporter and said that they protect all their natural rainforests and they're actually carbon neutral and carbon positive. So it's just how you want to look at it. I think that, yeah, again, it's just people trying to manipulate the narrative into which way the country goes for their own profits and their own agenda.
But the bottom line is, a lot of people have bought into it. The powers who are illegitimately in control around the world right now have bought into it primarily because they're making a lot of money off it, and so are their buddies. And that's going to drive certain of these commodity prices for the foreseeable future. I think anyway. Um, the effect of overseas markets on the U.S. market. You got the COMEX, you got the Chicago Mercantile, and then overseas you got London, and you got Shanghai, and you got Oshkosh in Turkey and whatever. What kind of effect do big blips up or down in commodities overseas have on the U.S. market?
Well, what you'll see is you'll often see an immediate reaction. So when a commodity goes up dramatically on one exchange, it'll have to correct on the other exchange as well. So people will look for different substitutions on various prices. So if oil prices go up dramatically over in the Middle East on those exchanges, you'll see the US exchanges go up as well. And it's because of the fact that those countries that need that particular product or hedge or speculate on that particular commodity, they'll need to go out and secure it on different exchanges. So we just saw that with a country like India that has sugar trade on their exchange. They said that they were curbing all exports of sugar because they wanted to
Right,
keep
right,
inflation down, the cost, because sugar goes into so many different things. you saw sugar prices on the Intercontinental Exchange, known as the ICE Exchange, go up dramatically, and they balanced each other. We're seeing a situation with Robusta coffee, which trades on another exchange, where that crop over in Vietnam was severely damaged from typhoons and droughts and things like that. Coffee prices reached all-time highs. So then those end users, guys like Starbucks and things that need to hedge price control, they'll go out and buy it on the ICE exchange where coffee prices goes. And coffee a couple weeks ago, man, I was getting worried. I thought I
Yeah,
was going to have to
yeah,
switch to tea or something.
yeah. I know, I know. And I'm a huge coffee drinker. Let me tell you, my cup's right here. So, last question for you, okay? Um, there's manipulation in these markets. Number one, what kind of manipulation? Number two, who are the I mean, there's a lot of people playing games, but who are the primary manipulators? And number three, why?
Well, I mean, you being in a cattle guy, you know about uh, what's her face, Hillary Clinton. She had a futures trading account.
Right.
She never lost any money in the live cattle market, and that's one of the most difficult ones to trade in. So, it all depends on what kind of information people have and things like that. I mean, I like to think that that the manipulation, isn't there because of the fact that all known information should be going into the market, and that's what determines the particular price action on it. I think that countries like in the Middle East, where they know that, or Russia, for instance, they could curb their production levels pretty quickly. They could be long crude oil futures, and it could be driving prices up. So there could be big players as far as when you do get into some funny business in the pricing. Somebody like China could start, buying things, and then all of a sudden they try and increase their production on or increase the amount of grains that they're buying. You're gonna see those flash sales, and prices are gonna quickly adjust. But I think the speculators really come in and fill in the blanks on this. So I don't necessarily think the edge is all there the way people think. I think that you look at things like silver, for instance, there were periods that have been proven where there's been manipulation in that market. But you got to look at some of these large banks. They do work with the mining operations. The mining operations have accounts with them. They are trying to hedge their forward production. So they'll naturally have short positions. What I tend to find out is that people that do yell manipulation in the market, it's oftentimes just because the price isn't going the way they're going.
Right.
I bet on a sports game, and we didn't get a couple calls, and I said that the referees are manipulating the game, but it is what it is,
It was a
so
bad football.
yeah, it was deflated, so I mean, I don't like, we start going into a gray area, and it gets a little bit deep in there. So, I don't want to talk bad about the business I'm in. I think that the regulators do a good job looking into it. I think
Oh,
that
I
any
think the business you're in is great. I mean, look, it doesn't
yeah,
matter what business you're in. You can be in real estate, you can be a rancher, you can be in cattle. It doesn't matter.
I, I
It,
once
there's always the bad apple.
I once had a famous, one of the most famous weathermen as a client, and he would indicate, this was like 20 years ago. He would indicate and the gentleman passed away. He was well respected. He would indicate that the weather was going to be bad in the Midwest, and grain futures would go up and grain futures would go down. And they thought that he could be manipulating the prices. And then the traders got this ridiculous idea where they sprayed rain, or they sprayed hoses off the top of board of trade. They saw that it was raining out, so that's good for the grain. So they sold it all short. So, you get a lot of these emotional plays and the people reacting to different things out there. But again, like I said, at all times there are buyers and sellers in the market. It's just a matter of, are the sellers trying to sell higher up? Are the buyers coming in waves and pushing prices higher? We saw just this week, some of the stocks like the AMCs and the GameStops are called meme stocks, these little ones that are kind of defunct companies really getting some momentum higher, and it pushed prices higher. That spillover effect goes into what other commodities out there, and we saw Bitcoin futures up big, we saw silver
Right.
futures up big. So it's just, where do the traders want to go? And really, when you get into what drives the price of a commodity, I think it's three things: it's supply, it's demand, and then it's price momentum. Where are they driving prices? And I think that if you get on the right side of all that, you're able to exploit it, whether it's the upside or downside. You could get yourself in a good position, and it could be quite lucrative to be speculating in futures markets.
So where can folks contact you?
The best thing to do is to go to our company's website, bluelinefutures.com. We do put out a lot of research and content. That's what our clients and the traders that trade with us love most. They could see daily videos, actual trade ideas, an email every morning. You go to bluelinefutures.com, you register for a 2-week trial. All you got to put is your name and your email address, and you'll start getting the Grain Express, the Livestock Roundup. I do the Metals Minute every day. It's a 5-minute video on what's going on in the markets, the direction that I see, the prices going on metals. And I also talk about the energies and the stock indices every
Yeah,
single day.
which is great, by the way.
Oh, thanks a lot.
There's more information in that 5 minutes than if you tuned into mainstream media and listened to these moron talking heads yak for an hour. I mean, it's a terrific little video. Every morning I watch it. Absolutely. And well, we're going to have all your stuff underneath in the comment section on the videos and yada, 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 and on the website on the Right Side Radio. And this has been great. I really think you've helped a lot of people understand the futures market, because everybody's heard about it, but it's kind of this mysterious mass out there. Like, yeah, I've heard about it, but I really don't know. And I think you kind of brought everything into perspective. It's terrific. Really appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I really enjoyed it.
You betcha, guy. We'll do it again, and we'll see. By the way, I happen to agree with you 100%. The futures markets are telling us, shall we say, some stormy inflationary effects are ahead of us. And
110%.
yeah, we'll have you back on 3-4 months from now, and we'll compare notes on what things are today and what things are then. In
Well,
other words,
thanks. I
what's
appreciate that.
going wrong. You bet. Thanks a lot, Phil.
Take care.
Bye now. Well, I hope you enjoyed that. I learned a bunch, and hopefully you did too. And now we're going to have rat-a-tat-tat, and it kind of ties in with exactly the things Phil and I were discussing and what we discussed last week with John Rubino. Listen to that video. That was another great interview. John Rubino rocks. So does Phil. And so will our upcoming guests. I'll have a list of them for you probably over the next week or two of these videos, since we are in our infancy. We are embryonic tissue, embryonic video tissue. So in the economy, a whole bunch of numbers came out here over the last week. First of all, the markets are upside down. People are not using their heads. There's FOMO, fear of missing out, and there's greed. Unfortunately, there's a lot of greed, which has led to the corruption that we see rampant throughout our government, or should I say governments, because it unfortunately filters down to state and some local governments, depending upon where you live. But if you take out the government's been crowing about retail sales, right? Retail sales are great and they're up and blah, blah, blah. Let me tell you, folks, if you adjust retail sales for inflation, even using the government numbers on inflation, the government numbers on inflation are, shall we say, underinflated. Okay. If you go to shadowstatistics.com, that'll give you the real numbers. Those are based on the composites back from the 1980s and 1990s, before they started playing games. John Rubino and I discussed last week this at length, all the games the government is playing with these numbers. But if you take out inflation, even using the government's numbers, retail sales in the United States of America are now negative. But there's no recession coming. Don't worry about it. Everything is cool. And GDP in Q1 was 1.6%. 1.6%. 1.6% is anemic. It's just above life support for a country like this. They're projecting, of course, their projections are meant for the election. They're projecting 4.2. Oh, yeah, right. 4.2% for quarter two. Well, some preliminary numbers just came out, and it looks like for the last 6 weeks, based on the official indexes, that we are operating at a 0.5% under zero. In other words, negative 0.5% on GDP. Did you know that 1.2% of that 1.6% was healthcare, insurance, and housing? In other words, of the total GDP, that 1.6%, almost 80% was for necessities, no discretionary spending. That shows a strapped consumer. That shows people running out of money. You've already heard on other outlets, I hope that you're up to speed, about the rapidly rising delinquency rate on vehicles, on home mortgages, on particularly credit cards. If I break this into dollars, 74 billion was non-discretionary. In other words, stuff you wanted but didn't need. 44 billion was discretionary. And 53 billion was the deficit between all that spending, discretionary and non-discretionary, and income. In other words, consumers in the United States went $53 billion into the hole. $53 billion into the hole. Did you know over the last 2 weeks, there's been a huge net outflow, a decrease in the amount of bank deposits? And this ties right into these figures I'm bringing you, because the bank deposits aren't going down because people are drawing out their money and going on vacation. They're going down because people are running out of the savings, part of which came from the imbecilic, moronic, and I might add, I think intentionally treasonous $5 trillion that was printed and spread out to people in the form of checks during the scamdemic. Restaurant activity. You know what happened during COVID. Most restaurants in most places, fortunately, there were some that said no, and there were states that said no. But in all the other places in the United States, and this is the majority of places in the United States, restaurants were shut down, right? It was a lockdown period. Obviously, when a restaurant is shut down, it doesn't do any business. It doesn't sell any food. It doesn't have any income. A few entrepreneurs were able to do deliveries or come up with some kind of plan to at least kind of keep the doors open, but at a greatly reduced rate of sales. Did you know that restaurant sales over the last month or two, in fact, the study was done originally in January of this year, are now down to just above, that is just above, the lowest restaurant sales in history, which was the COVID lockdown. That's how far restaurant sales have fallen over the last year. And that also points to folks running out of money and the lack of ability, the non-ability to spend funds for non-discretionary items like going out to eat. And full-time jobs, I looked at these figures today, they're down 0.6%. Full-time jobs are down. I forget what the government's telling you. Listen to John Rubino's interview last week. We go into great detail on this. It's really kind of shocking. You know, your government is not telling you the truth. They're not telling you the truth about a lot of things. The economy is one of those things, and that, of course, is politically driven. In addition, the new jobs that are being created, besides being mostly part-time, are, and listen to the interview last week, going more to non-American citizens than to American citizens. Think about the southern border, folks. Full-time jobs are cratering. The part-time jobs are being taken in some cases by the same person twice or three times just to make ends meet. So when the government says a job has been created, they forget to tell you it was part-time. And they forget to tell you that Sally took that job as her third part-time job. That's not really new job creation, is it? And last but not least, the government using your tax money, of course, because everything is your money, folks, right? You're the never ending well of funds for the elite, for the government. Your tax money is funding all this. And when I say all this, that means the 50 to 70,000 jobs the federal government has been adding for almost 18 months each and every month. So when you see a jobs report which says, I'll just take a number, 150,000 new jobs, remember, somewhere between one third and one half are government jobs with payrolls being paid by your tax money. In the face of all this, I think we have to conclude that the U.S. economy is weakening. Inflation is increasing, just like Phil said, just like John Rubino said last week. I'm going to have other guests on which are going to corroborate that also. And you need to adjust to it. You're not going to be able to change it. Yes, you can change it at the ballot box, hopefully, if the elections are free, fair, and, should we say, without fraud. That's a lot to hope for. But it's worth the fight. But you need to make adjustments. As I said last week, the first thing they tell you when you get on a plane is you put your own oxygen mask on first before you help others. So you getting prepared financially, physically, in terms of location, a safe location, in terms of food storage, water storage, etc., is absolutely critical to certainly the thriving and very possibly the survival of you and your family, and the maintenance of your wealth to the extent you can, given what's coming at us, and very importantly, the protection and maintenance of your freedoms, because it's up to us. There's nobody else out there that's going to kind of solve this mess, and we can't solve the mess if we're on our hands and knees begging for food from the government who's buying it and distributing it using our tax money to feed us. Think about the futures market. Think about what it's saying. Think about what John Rubino was warning about last week. Think about just these few rat-a-tat-tats I brought you on the economic level. And there's a couple of other rat-a-tat-tats. As you know, there's some problems with the judicial system in the United States. The law is not being applied equally or fairly or even in comport with the statute. You can see it on full display in a million different ways, but we'll just take the 4 Trump trials, which are total nonsense. And now, 2 of the judges, the 2 in New York, Erdogan, who presided over the supposed fraud case where he made up values. I mean, my background is real estate, folks. His values were absolutely taken out of his butt. They were purposely diminished in his assessment of the case. And I don't mean diminished by $1 million or $10 million. I mean diminished by hundreds of millions of dollars. Just outrageous stuff. And now Erdogan has been caught talking about the case to attorneys and getting advice from attorneys, which is a huge no-no when you're a judge. So he's now under review by the, shall we say, the law police in the state and city of New York. And it just couldn't happen to a nicer guy. because when a judge does not apply the law according to the Constitution, according to the statute, or equally and justly, and when he makes up his own facts to arrive at what he wants to be the predetermined conclusion, that's treason. That goes beyond just breaking the code of ethics. It's treason. The other judge, Waywan, or whatever his name is, doesn't matter. It's now been found out that his family might profit depending upon how that trial comes out. This is the Stormy Daniels whatever trial. And we now find out, and on the Right Side Radio website, we have a video of this, that his daughter has raised somewhere between $80 and $100 million for Democratic candidates, and that the judge apparently has also given handsomely to Democratic candidates, including Joe Biden. Huh, who would have thought? So once again, you have a travesty, a digression from true justice going on in that courtroom. And we all know that if the last name was Clinton, or the last name was Obama, or the last name was Kerry, all of whom should be tried, we all know that they would not be treated this way. And that is an unequal application of the law. And when we get control of this country back from the elite progressives who are illegitimately in power, the tyranny of the minority, as I like to call it, that's one of the very first things we have to fix, because you have to have faith in the system. You have to have faith in the system. You have to have faith in the law, and you have to have faith in the application of the law. So this is Reid Lance Rosenthal, the Cowboys Take. Thank you for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed it. Gave you a little food for thought, taught you a little stuff, made you smile, made you giggle, made you laugh. And we will see you next week. In the meantime, you keep the wind at your back.